In part one of today's two-part leadership journey with Colonel Bob Mitchell, he's going to be describing today the sacrifices that are necessary for elite leaders to lead well in complex organizations and complex missions.
At Initiative One, we're igniting a leadership revolution by helping organizations eliminate the drama, improve decision-making, and win as a team. Join Dr. Fred Johnson on the Leadership Initiative podcast as we uncover insights to maximize your impact and transform your life.
Welcome to the Leadership Initiative. I'm Dr. Fred Johnson. I'm the founder of Initiative One. We're delighted to have you join us with us today. I'm particularly pleased to introduce to you our very special guest, who happens to be a lifelong friend of mine. In fact, I would suggest that retired Colonel Bob Mitchell probably knows me as long as anyone who's living right now. In fact, Bob is my cousin. We were very close growing up. We got into a lot of mischief together. I will tell you right from the beginning, it was all his fault. And so it's amazing, Bob, that here we are all these years later, visiting each other in a professional capacity. And it is so good to have you on this show for lots of different reasons. And so, Bob, I want to welcome you to our show today.
Well, Dr. Fred, thank you very much. I will be formal and cordial, obviously, at this point, and I'd like to, say thank you and hello to your wife, the CEO, Tracy. So thank you for having me today. It's a pleasure.
You're welcome. And if by chance Bobby slips in on this conversation, as Freddie may slip in on this conversation, it's entirely okay. We can bleep certain things out of our production, Bob. I just want to warn you about that. I was talking to Bob prior to our coming on air, and I said, Bob, is it okay if I introduce you by the rank that you so aptly earned as retired Colonel Bob Mitchell? And Bob was not entirely comfortable with that for the reason, and it's part of the reason why he's been so successful. He said, Fred, I've moved on in my life. I've continued to grow. I've continued to move in new arenas. And my identity is not locked into something that I've done in the past. And I said to Bob, that's the exact reason why you've been so amazingly successful in your career. Bob, could you talk about with us, number one, walk us through your career. You have, as far as I'm concerned, the best part of your leadership is that you are a leader who has been not relying upon rank or position. The reason why I've talked to so many people in the Army who knew you so well, and frankly, you're a walking legend. And the reason why you are a walking legend is all of the people who told me how you invested into them as people. You made their lives better. You opened up opportunities. My own son, my oldest son, Todd, if it hadn't been for you intervening at a point in his life, Todd's had a decorated career as a Black Hawk helicopter pilot. That almost did not happen, but you stepped in and intervened on his behalf. And he has had the opportunity to save hundreds and hundreds of lives in his career. And every one of those lives saved were linked to you. And he's just one person. So talk about influence. Walk us through your career. Walk us through why it's so important for you. I mean, you're going after your Ph.D. in the third or fourth quarter of your life, which is amazing and says a lot. Walk us through this.
Okay, thanks, Dr. Fred. To kind of get the genesis of probably my leadership foundation was developed early in my life. I was gifted athletically from the Johnson family. I know sometimes that's kind of hard to believe, but I had a vision as a youngster of where I was going to be 10, 20, 30 years from where I was. And I had a high school football coach. His name was Coach Dave Hansbarger, very, very successful coach. He took me under his wing as a young sophomore in high school, freshman in high school. And the team was struggling. And the town was behind the team and everything, but the team was struggling. And the record was reflective of a team that wasn't doing very well.
And this was in Toledo, Ohio area.
This was in, Toledo, Swanton, Ohio. And what transpired after that, he told me what I needed to do to be successful, not just the loss and win column, but how to become the leader of the team. I didn't pick that myself. It just kind of happened. And it quickly kind of, emerged that I had some leadership qualities, and I ended up as a young sophomore moving into the quarterback position out of high school, which was frightening, terrifying to a 16-year-old, 15-year-old in high school. But I quickly found out that I loved being, trying to lead an organization someplace. And that required a lot of hard work, and it required dedication. It required things you had to do in the summertime where people were having fun and we're working out, we're running. I mean, we are dedicated. Our team is becoming very close. And then what happened was, throughout the rest of my high school years, we were undefeated, and we were a very successful high school football team. And many of our teammates, to include myself, we were fortunate to get college scholarships, NCAA scholarships to go play college football. That was sort of the genesis of where I kind of took off with leadership. Now, throughout most of my life, I would say that I've been a leadership practitioner, and I couldn't tell you what leadership was. It's almost like, you can tell a fish by its smell, by what it looks like. If it looks like a fish, it smells like a fish, it probably is a fish. But trying to describe a fish, beyond that, the anatomy, what kind of fish it is, what kind of lake is it? Is it saltwater, freshwater? It didn't really have that kind of objectivity. But throughout my life, it started in high school. It started in high school athletics, and it led to college. It led to the military, a 30-year military career. I was very fortunate to be in various command positions. That is a distinct honor. That is something that the people of the United States entrust their leaders to, taking care of their sons and daughters. It's a very honorable position, but very weighty on you on a daily basis. You can never relax, but that builds character, and that has kind of built the building block of my career throughout everything that I have done. And here I am, 66, and I should be enjoying retirement and sitting back at the beach and relaxing, but I want to continue in that leadership endeavor. So I'm doing a Ph.D. in global leadership with Troy University, and hoping at some point to become a college professor, research, and start some new programs, specifically in global leadership and in aviation. That's kind of where I would like to go. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. But I go back to, if you ask successful leaders, if they're fortunate enough to be successful, what was that one person that was that impetus? For me, it was Coach Dave Hansbarger back in high school. He's passed away, but I still hear him in my head every day. So that's a good thing.
Well, the cool thing is you are that Coach Hansberger to so many people that you'll never have any clue of the impact that you've had. Um, Bob, I think of the incredible places of high risk, high stakes that you've been in as a leader. When you are a gifted leader with the ability to lead an organization well, there's a sacred responsibility that comes with that. And the reality is that the greater your influence, the more harrowing positions that life will put you in. Talk to me about, if you can recall, what was one of those moments in your military career, or even in life outside of military, that you would suggest is probably one of the most pressurized, harrowing moments of your life, and yet you came through it? What leadership lessons were so critical for you to get through that moment?
I wouldn't say, Dr. Fred, that there was one particular moment that I found myself in a situation where you have to deliver the goods, or you have to perform at some level. I can't really think of a seminal event that occurred. But what I will tell you, going back to, I had the privilege, I had the training, I had the years that were invested into the U.S. Army. At the 17th, 18th year of service in the Army, I was selected for battalion command. That battalion command consisted of 75 medevac helicopters, 70 ground ambulance vehicles, and about 1,000 soldiers that I took to Iraq. I was stationed at Fort Hood, Texas. Many of the units that I took to Iraq, I did not train with on a routine basis. They came from, there were National Guard, there were reserve units, there were active duty. So a lot of times the training was virtual, and a lot of times it was a command and control thing. But we kind of came together in Iraq, and we had a whole year that we had to spend there. And this was 2004 and 2005. The honor of being able to command 1,000 soldiers, I know that sounds like a lot of people, but you're not in daily contact with those people. It's virtually impossible as one single leader to do that. You have to put forth a vision, you have to put forth your command philosophy, and then you have to trust your organization to do the right thing. And that requires a lot. You, as a leader, commander, you have to give up a lot to allow your organization to go out there and do high risk missions at night. Sand blowing everywhere. The organization is going into hostile areas to pick up injured soldiers that need to get to battlefield healthcare as soon as possible. If we could get them to a surgical intervention within the first hour of their injury, and these were complex battle injuries. These were not just typical gunshot wounds. In 2004 and 5, when we couldn't figure out where Iraq was going after we took it down, the insurgency started to kick in. The Iraqi military was disbanded. They went into the countryside and into the villages, and they're well trained, but they became civilians. They became enamored. They became frustrated. So the insurgency began. And next thing you know, we find 500-pound bombs along roadsides that are into the guardrails that, by detonation, either by a cell phone or some other kind of electronic means, would cause devastating blasts to protected armored vehicles. I mean, that's how devastating they were. So we would see these complex battle injuries when we would go and pick these young troops up. Missing limbs, loss of blood, it just complex injuries. And as a commander, you got to trust your unit to do the right thing because they're well trained. But you to command, to provide leadership, you got to give up that in order for it to occur. Going back to your original question, the stress of an entire year of going through that, there are no breaks in combat. You don't get a day off. So it was the longevity of the operation that wears on you. And what I learned from leadership perspective in that regard was that as commanding that task force in Iraq, required me to get out there and visit my formations on a daily basis. I mean, I had 17 forward operating bases that were spread out in Iraq, about the size of Texas, is about the land space size. And I'd have to get out there and see how the troops are doing. You have to get on the ground. You have to walk the ground with them. You got to see what they're feeling, not just, hey, how's the mission going, and looking at, how we're operating in that environment, but also how are they feeling family-wise? You got to ask the deep questions, and they'll pick up, I think, pretty quickly whether you're being sincere in your questions or not. And the weight of all that over a year, when I kept thinking back, I can't even think about my own family. I mean, I hate to say this, but I was just so busy worrying about other people. I didn't even have time to worry about myself or my family. And they were well taken care of. I mean, they were a military family. They were used to it. But you really have to subordinate your personal desires. And, you can never in combat sit there as a leader and feel sorry for yourself, because you got 1,000 soldiers that are looking at you on a daily basis and saying, hey, you're the leader. We're going to follow you as long as you can hang. And I'll tell you what, it's a grind. But it was probably the best laboratory for leadership practicum that I can think of, which again was an honor and a pleasure, but it was a grind. But there was no single event, but and there were missions that we flew that were dangerous and that kind of stuff. But actually executing the mission was easy. We train in the military to do those high risk. They look like they're very dangerous, but they're actually quite simple when you nug it down a little bit and you do the procedures and you take the risk assessment, you mitigate that kind of thing. But the daily grind of leadership was definitely a toll. And but that has applications to the business world. That has applications to the educational world. That has applications to just about anything that we do in our business. So
I'm listening to you, Bob, and I'm thinking exactly what you just said. I had a head coach in the NFL just reach out to me this week, and he said, what are the characteristics of the leaders on a team? How would you define those in 4 or 5 bullet points? And you've named 3 of them that I shared. Number 1 is that an elite leader loves his or her team to the point that they're willing to subjugate their ego. They're willing to subjugate their own personal interests for the sake of the larger mission of the organization. And here you were describing that you were so entrenched in your mission that there were days that you didn't even have time to even consider the needs of your family. And knowing you, that's not you. I mean, you're such a family person. And so I see the lack of ego and the subjugation of self to a higher purpose. I see a second thing that you're talking about, that a leader loves his or her people. I mean, we think about the macho military, and here you are describing that one of your most important tasks, you said, I had to let go of the need to control all of my troops. I had to let go of that. And yet I found myself visiting these 17 forward bases, asking them, tell me about your family. How are you? Those deep, deep questions. And so you describe that you cannot be an elite leader unless you love your people and care about what is going on in their personal lives. That's the second thing that you've just described. And I think the third thing that you described that is so powerful is that it's an ongoing pressure that never stops. And you have to rely on muscle memory. You have to rely on your training. And so it's a commitment to ongoing knowledge, ongoing routine. And those are the basics of leadership that we teach. And here you're describing that you are using them every day in one of the most demanding, complex leadership moments.